At one point, I remembered to mention my immigration journey and becoming an Australian citizen. My journey to Australia was not smooth like others. But because of that, I was able to gather valuable life experiences. Today, I would like to share a story that is indeed true. This story has taught me many valuable lessons. I hope it will also be of help to your journeys in the future. There was a time at the place where my company was working, they were preparing to file for a permanent residency visa for me. However, they later received a notification from the Department of Immigration. The case was that my company was lacking some standards to sponsor me for permanent residency. Specifically, the government's requirement was that companies, once they wanted to sponsor a foreign national, must allocate a certain budget, perhaps a few percent, for internal training activities. They must first train Australians and only then be allowed to hire foreign nationals if they still can't meet the job requirements. The problem at that time with the company was that the company was developing quite well, so their total revenue was quite large, hence, even though they allocated a lot of budget for internal training. However, the total of those budgets still wasn't enough, 3% leading to the company not meeting the standard to continue sponsoring my profile, resulting in me being in a very difficult situation. At that time, as my visa was about to expire to be able to continue staying in Australia, I had to find another company ready to sponsor me and also meet the standard to sponsor. If not, I would have to leave the country within 30 days. The issue here is that not many companies have the ability to sponsor like the companies I was working for at the time, which was also a very successful company. But it still lacked a criterion for training activities, and there were not many companies that had the ability to sponsor, let alone anyone foolish enough to invest in a candidate like me. Then, they had to do everything, the complicated procedures, and prove the Department of Home Affairs enough conditions. Then they had to hire a lawyer to do it quickly for me. Because at that time, my time was not much. Even if I did all of those things, it still had a chance that the Department of Immigration would reject my file, saying that their efforts were in vain. While they just need to accept a native Australian person, the next day they could go to work without any headaches anymore. My position at that time was almost seen as hopeless, to find a company that was eligible to be a sponsor and willing to sponsor me. It was almost an impossible task, not to mention that I only had barely 2 months to do so. I have told this story before in my previous shares, but in that article, I only needed to succeed once, but in that article, I also failed. To be specific, later I did what I had to do. At that time, I determined that I had to do whatever it takes to accomplish the impossible task. I began to develop strategies for myself. If I just submit the application in a normal way with a few lines of information in my job application, it wouldn't be anything special. At that time, it was certain that they would reject my file from the initial interview list. So I decided that in that pile of a few hundred candidate files, somehow I had to stand out the best in my abilities. In Australia, when applying for a job, first, usually has a portfolio including a CV. Second, a cover letter, a LinkedIn profile, and some recommendation letters from former companies if one is more skilled. However, I thought that even if I made all those parts look the best, my portfolio still wouldn't stand out enough and wouldn't separate from the crowd. Somehow, my portfolio had to stand out from the others. And what I did was, for each company I chose to apply to, I sat down and researched them in great detail. I collected all the information and data I could gather. And then, I started to build for them a product development strategy that was suitable for their condition and didn't require them to read those strategies. For each company I applied to, I prepared a video for them, similar to slides. In those videos, I present my analysis, including the advantages and disadvantages, as well as the company's upcoming development plans. I have taken the time to thoroughly prepare these videos, making them almost a growth strategy for the company in the next few years, not only in terms of products, but also in terms of competitive advantages compared to competitors and many other factors. In general, it's like a strategic analysis to ensure that I don't invest too much in a company that cannot guarantee my return. Before applying to a particular company, I use various methods to determine if the company is capable of sponsoring me. This includes everything from a printed account sheet, letters of recommendation from previous companies, a personal website with details of all my projects, and a video presentation. All the strategies I mentioned earlier are accompanied by the research and data I have used to implement these development strategies. As a result, 100% of the companies I applied to responded and invited me for an interview. In the second round, most of them appreciated my research, even if it could be right or wrong, as it showed the level of investment I had in the company before applying. However, as expected, most of the companies declined my application after learning about my visa status. Although they said they really wanted to accept me, They were not ready to go through the procedures to sponsor me. That was until I found a company in Sydney. The HR department was quite impressed with my application and forwarded my resume and video directly to the CEO. After watching it, the CEO asked HR to arrange for me to fly from Melbourne to Sydney for an interview, which the CEO would also attend. I saw this as a rare and valuable opportunity to present my preparation to the highest level of the company. I used all my research skills to prepare for the interview, which ended up being almost a presentation on the company's entire product strategy for the next few years. While I was presenting, the CEO listened intently and asked me to stop at one point so he could invite some people from relevant departments to come and listen. After the presentation was over, instead of asking technical questions, the CEO asked me two simple questions that I still remember to this day. He asked me why I took the time to do all of this research, and I told him honestly about my situation, that I came to Australia with the goal of getting citizenship, but now that goal was uncertain. I explained that with my situation, few companies would accept me to work, but I decided to do my best until the very last moment before I had to leave Australia. The second question he asked was what kind of goals I would set if I worked at the company. I told him that I believed I could help the company build strong product foundations for growth over the next 5 years, and that I would do everything in my power to make it possible. At the end of the session, the CEO personally walked me to the door of the company. Along the way, he told me that my strategies well represented what he was trying to build for the company, but that was not the reason he chose me. He said that what he cares about is that he believed, through what he witnessed that day, that I would not give up easily and would fight to the last effort, once I have set a goal. He just needed me to keep the promise I made in the interview. Before I left, he shook my hand firmly and said, "Rest assured, there's no need to worry about visa issues anymore. The company will do whatever it takes to secure your file." He kept his promise and hired one of the best immigration law firms in Sydney to handle my case. On the company's side, they let everyone do everything they could to meet the requirements of the immigration department, including publishing newspapers, advertisements, and recruitments everywhere. The position needed to be filled in order to prove to the immigration department that the company had done everything but still could not find suitable candidates within Australia. As a result, the company was forced to hire foreigners in all stages of the process, choosing the fastest service possible in order to get my visa approved before its expiration date. Finally, all formalities were completed and my visa was granted exactly 1 day before my scheduled departure from Australia. The company then paid for my move from Melbourne to Sydney, where I would live and work. The CEO kept his promise, and I kept mine. During my 2 years at the company, I did everything in my power to help the company build the best product platform and product strategy possible, even if it meant offending other departments at times. In some cases, he had to invite me into the room out of impatience. He told me that several departments within the company were not satisfied with me. Is there a way for me to be more reserved? I responded to him to some extent. I felt grateful to both him and the company, so I wanted to keep my promise to him. I knew that even if I tried, I wouldn't be well liked by everyone and I could even leave the company after establishing these foundations. Nevertheless, I still wanted to fulfill my promise. Fortunately, I kept that promise even after I left the company. When I had the chance to see him again, he informed me that the company was still using the foundations I had built for a long time after my departure. This story isn't meant to boast about my abilities. Now that I'm retired, there's no need for me to prove anything. The reason I'm sharing this story is simply because it taught me a valuable lesson about perseverance and trying. It reinforced the idea that with effort and determination, we can achieve things that might seem impossible. In my case, 99% of people who heard my story thought it was impossible for me to find a sponsor for my company. However, I was able to find one and I attribute my success to putting my all into what I do. I'm not particularly smart or talented, but the majority of companies responded positively to my efforts. They were impressed not because of my brilliant strategies, but because I did something no one else did. The effort and energy I put into my work is something anyone can do and it's not a result of exceptional or innate talent. That's a short story and some insights I wanted to share with you through today's podcast episode. I hope it brings value to your journeys. I'll end the episode here. If you found this content helpful, please share it with others. Thank you for watching and have a great weekend.